Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
And it's 7:06 here, this very busy Tuesday morning, first day of October. Welcome to the new fiscal year for the federal government. It's O'Connor and Company getting you through this day. Coming up in 30 minutes, our friend Beverly Hallberg, frequent guest and friend of the program, is actually near the damage in North Carolina. She'll give us a firsthand report. And at 8:05, Corey Lewandowski of the Trump campaign. That there is Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
This here is Larry O'Connor, and joining us right there is Grover Norquist. He's the president Americans for Tax Reform. There's a lot to get to, Grover, but, you know, anytime it's the first day of the new fiscal year, I always want to check in with you and see, from your perspective, how well is Congress doing in their job as the stewards of our financial health and of our making sure Americans can keep as many of their tax dollars in their pocket?
I don't know. For the last 200 years, not very well.
Yeah, that's not specific to this Congress necessarily, but hope springs eternal. You have sort of adjusted your focus more on the state level where things are happening much more rapidly in terms of tax reform, right?
Absolutely. Because there's a split between the Republicans and Democrats, House, Senate, President, nothing big, really good or really awful will happen, just creeping awfulness. But in the 50 states, many of them, 24 are completely run by Republicans, the House, Senate, and governorship. Mm-hmm. And quite a few of them, about 17, are completely run by Democrats.
Yeah.
So you see, you know, if you want to raise taxes, you want to look at Minnesota, where the, you know, governor of Minnesota is running for vice president. He's done amazing things to raise taxes in his state over the last few years and spend more money. But other states like Florida and Texas and Tennessee have been doing much better. So there's good and there's bad at the state level. And 10 states are phasing their income taxes down to zero. They've made that decision.
Yeah, and it's important as we start to preview the vice presidential debate tonight, which you'll hear live here on WMAL, that, you know, with J.D. Vance, he obviously comes from the private sector. He's just been a senator for 2 years. He doesn't have a huge – he has policy positions, but he doesn't have the kind of track record that the governor of Minnesota does. And he had a surplus. A lot of states, a lot of Democrat states coming out of COVID, they ended up getting a ton of money from the federal government. They gave him surpluses. And then instead of giving money back to the people of Minnesota, he just blew through that surplus and then raised taxes again, I understand.
$17 billion surplus at the state level.
Wow.
Spent in a year. But that wasn't enough. He had to raise taxes over a 4-year period, another $10 billion, payroll taxes, retail delivery taxes, 50 cents every time Amazon comes by your house, higher car taxes, that's exciting, higher taxes on employers, taxes on savings and investment, and I think it's got rid of a bunch of standard deductions and so on for middle-income people that they took. He allowed local governments to do more taxing than they'd been able to in the future. But I think the really important stuff is when he drilled down and decided that if you had one of those boats under 17 feet, he was going to double the tax of your boat. You have to get a permit to have a boat that's under 17 feet.
Wow.
There's another thing.
By the way, hold on real fast, because that includes kayaks and paddle boards. And I mean, it's like literally, this is what, like my family, we can't afford a boat. We're not rich. But we have a couple of kayaks. We have some paddle boards, so we can have some family fun out there on the Chesapeake Bay. We're not, and that he taxed, because you think a tax on boats.
Just
that's for those super rich people.
Especially in Minnesota.
Kayaks.
Yes.
He taxed kayaks.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, these are kayaks. I mean, they had to pay the $23 registration for your kayak or paddleboard. And whereas he only raised the price of boats under 17 feet by 100%, it's 119% for those nasty kayaks and paddleboards.
Unbelievable.
This is a guy who can't get his hands on enough of your cash.
Yeah. Yeah. And Grover, this is the same guy who says, mind your own damn business. But
right.
I want to follow up on that. You know, we see a lot from Democrats today kind of attacking things that make life pleasurable or you know, sort of better. Things like air conditioning, the attacks on gas stoves, you know, Democrat Don Byers from the Virginia area, you know, wanting to take people's gas stoves, and now you bring up this stuff on taxing fishing boats and canoes and kayaks, which, by the way, are the very vehicles you would think someone who champions the green initiatives would want people to buy. But are we going to see more of this sort of a tax on the things that, again, make life easier for Americans if Waltz makes it to the vice president position?
Yes, he is a far left of center progressive, which is why those parts of the Democratic Party insisted on him, not Shapiro.
Yeah.
Because they knew him and knew him to be down the line left wing. Even though as a congressman for many years, because he was in a Republican district, he voted conservative on Second Amendment and so on. As soon as he got out of that district, flipped 100%. They knew they could trust him to be that way. Who's the gentleman who said that a Puritan was somebody who somewhere was lived in fear that someplace out there, someone was having fun?
Sorry about that.
And I think our friends, the Democrats, have some fear that people are having comfort, and so let's make cooking more difficult by taking away gas stoves. Let's make driving to work or to visit your relatives more difficult by raising the price of gas. Where does this come from? This desire to meddle? Did you see the snitch hotline that Waltz put together? Okay, during COVID, he set up a snitch hotline. So in East Germany, people would call in and rat on their neighbors. He had this in Minnesota, and I have a list of some of the things that people called in on their neighbors. One, saw their neighbor hugging someone. Wanted to let you know that, boss. Another group of people were spotted by playing basketball.
Yeah.
Several were seen sneaking into church. One went to a store and they bought chips and sodas, which are not essential items.
Right.
And they wanted the governor to know that. Workers put a dock on in the lake. That's a dirty trick. It's worth working. Kids caught playing soccer. Catholics going to confessional. Lutherans serving meals in the church. In the church in the dining hall. They're spreading diseases to all those poor people. Oh, and people playing frisbee. And when this was brought up, and Minnesota said, "Could we get rid of this little spy system you set up?" He said, "It's for their own good."
There you go. Well, that actually goes back to the tax conversation, because when governments confiscate your wealth, or confiscate not even your wealth, your money, it's oftentimes framed within the context of fiscal need, but it's really about power. It's really about control. It's really about who's in charge, and the snitch line is a perfect example of that. Real fast, though, Grover, while we've got you, Grover Norquist, Americans for Tax Reform, let's look at the top of the ticket really fast. I don't know if you caught this, but during her interview with Stephanie Ruhle, she mentioned the tax deduction to start a small business. It's currently $5,000. She wants to raise it to $50,000. I don't even want to talk about the policy for a second. I'm more concerned that she doesn't even understand what a tax deduction is. I'm going to quote her here. She says, right now, the tax deduction is $5,000, and nobody in the year of our Lord 2024 can start a small business with $5,000. Does she think that a tax deduction is actually that you get to keep all of that money, or that it's some sort of credit that you get? Does she understand how tax deductions work? Because she makes it sound like if the tax deduction is $5,000, that means that's money that you get to use.
In her defense, the Democratic Party have turned the IRS into a cash machine. So the only tax cuts that Democrats like are when they actually are spending. And so she's assuming that all tax credits are simply checks you send out, because they do that a lot with various welfare programs. We're going to give everyone a tax credit. Well, the tax deduction, if you make $30,000 and there's a tax deduction of $2,000, you only pay tax on $28,000. Nobody sends you a check, okay? But a tax credit, the Democrats like to set up things where you get a check, whether or not you earned any money or not. They want to set up that the effort to have a universal basic income, UBI, which everybody gets a check from the government. First, they steal it from everybody else. Then they send everybody a check back. Some people get their money back. Some people get a lot more than they ever put in. And some people just see their income disappear. They view tax cuts and spending as the same thing.
Yeah.
And they try and confuse people by saying, I'm for tax cuts, when what they're really for is spending through the IRS.
Right.
And people need to not be confused by that. Evidently, the lady who wants to be president of the United States is confused by that.
I think you're being very generous, but let's go with that. Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, still doing incredibly vital work over there at that organization. Thank you, Grover. Always good to talk to you.
Larry, Julie, thank you.
It's 7:16. We better get straight to...
There's a pop culture phrase, wife guy, which you've kind of been known as. Are you familiar with this?
I've heard about it.
As called a wife guy, a proud wife guy? How do you feel about that?
Well, if I do something annoying to Kamala and she gets upset, I'll just show her that article.
Right.
And I'll say, I'm trying.
Or a T-shirt or a mug.
Yeah.
Doug Emhoff giving an exclusive interview to Jen Psaki. I don't know how she scored that one. What a get.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how the interview went. As Doug Emhoff is the Michael Bolton of political spouses, isn't he?
Poor Michael Bolton. Don't insult Michael Bolton.
You're right. He's more the Kenny G. She had this interview, and much of the discussion had to do with this idea that Doug Emhoff has reinvented masculinity for all of us.
Something that has also been an important part or an interesting part of how people have talked about your role here is how your role has reshaped the perception of masculinity. And I'm not sure you planned on that, but you are an incredibly supportive spouse. Has that been an evolution for you? And do you think that's part of the role you might play as first gentleman?
Now, it's funny because this is famously his second marriage. Mm-hmm. Now, if you wanted to ask Doug Emhoff about how supportive he is as a husband and as a father,
nanny.
would you ask it the question a little differently?
I might. Yes, I might. And
you famously had an affair with your kid's babysitter, got her pregnant,
and then offered to pay for an abortion.
Paid her hush money to get out of your life, not say anything, and get rid of this kid.
Yes.
That broke up your marriage. So I guess the question I'm asking, Mr. Emhoff, is what lessons have you learned now about how to be a good husband and a father? Because clearly you didn't have it back then.
Yeah, that would have been a much better way of stating it. I think what it is that he delivers to people like Jen Psaki and other leftist women is that he's quiet, he's meek.
Get out of the way and let me do my thing.
Yes, get out of the way and let me do what I need to do. Be one of these sort of quiet partners. And, the infidelity, I don't know that it really matters to a lot of leftists, to be honest with you. They're not really big on morality and fidelity. And I mean, not all Democrats, of course.
You were about to call him a silent partner, I think were the words you were going to use.
Yeah.
Silent partner?
Yeah.
I think there's something to that, actually. I'm gonna get to that in a second. But here's his answer, by the way, to that really tough question from Jen.
It's funny. I've started to think a lot about this. I've always been like this. My dad was like this. And to me, it's the right thing to do. Support women. It's mutual. Like with Kamala and I, we support each other. We have each other's back. And I've said many times when we lift up women, we support women, whether it's pay equity, child care, family leave, and all these issues that, this post-Dobbs hellscape, women should not be less than. Women should not have less rights and be treated differently. That's not the American way. And it's also not like if some woman succeeds, some dude out there is suffering, it's not a one-to-one relationship. When we lift up women, we lift up families, we lift up the economy. And when I was in the business world, it lifted up the organizations that I was in. It certainly lifted up the White House when you were there, with you there and Kamala as vice president.
By the way, Willie Brown did a lot of time lifting up Kamala Harris, too. But that was a whole other story.
That's right, yeah.
So
did he lift up that nanny?
Yeah.
Did he do a lot to help that nanny who he then paid to, stay quiet? We've never heard
hush
what
money.
happened.
It's hush money, not non-disclosure agreement.
We don't know what happened to that child that came from that relationship.
Can we talk about this relationship, though, for a second? Because this whole idea, you called him a silent partner, right? Mm-hmm. Let's just be clear, because I don't think people really put two and two together here. He married Kamala Harris when she was already the Attorney General of California. It was 2014 when they got married. He was already a successful corporate lawyer. He represents pharmaceutical companies. He's represented huge corporations who were doing business in California. And he married Kamala Harris, the sitting Attorney General. And did you know that it still has not been disclosed to the American people, all of the clients that Doug Emhoff has represented since they got married? We have no idea.
Nice to be a Democrat.
Who he's, and he's still a practicing lawyer, by the way. So forgive me for being a little skeptical of this marriage of convenience for the both of them, but this is a potential scandal waiting to explode here. And everyone's like, oh, you're so supportive of her. Of course he is.
Of course he is.
She's good for business. Yes. She's made him wealthy.
Again, I said this earlier. Stephanie Ruhle, who just recently did that interview with Kamala Harris.
The full body massage?
Yes, the full body massage. Think about everything that you just laid out. All of those questions about his clients, her power in California. Think about all the lies. We just talked to Alana from Washington Free Beacon about all the lies Tim Walz has given. Harris talking about how she worked at McDonald's with no record, no evidence of this, all these lies floating around. And instead, Stephanie Ruhle recently on Twitter did this breakdown. So J.D. Vance goes out and he's talking about...
Hold that thought. We got to get to it later in the program. We're way over.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. You're right. It's a good point to make about Stephanie Ruhle. But by the way, Jen Psaki could have also brought this up too, her colleague on MSNBC. Instead, it was all about being a supportive wife guy. 724.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Good Tuesday morning. Thanks for joining us. It's 7:37 on O'Connor and Company. At 8:05, join us. We'll be talking to Corey Lewandowski, Senior Trump Campaign Advisor. Give us a preview on tonight's debate. I'm Julie Gunlock alongside my good friend Larry O'Connor. Good morning, Larry.
You said that without any evidence. What are you, Tim Walz? Yes, I'm her good friend, and we were both in Tiananmen Square.
That's right.
When it happened.
Joining us now is our good friend and sometimes co-host of this very show. She really is a
good friend.
Yes, she really is. She really is. The beautiful Beverly Hallberg, president of District Media and media coach. Beverly, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, guys. It's good to hear your voices.
Well, we're glad you're safe. You're in North Carolina. You are near some of this destruction, and we wanted to kind of check in with you, see how you're doing, and give us an update on what's going on down there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'm actually right across the border in South Carolina, so I live right on the border of the two. In Greenville, South Carolina, I still don't have power. None of my family has power. And so we're staying about 30 minutes outside of Greenville in a house together, which is why I'm able to talk with you today, because we did not have cell service either. So it's been an interesting time. I just want to say for the audience, this is not hurricane country. We are not used to this.
Yeah.
This is... We knew it was coming, but we thought, okay, some high winds, we're going to have a lot of rain, yes, power outages, but we did not expect for there to be so many trees down, so many power lines out. The latest I've gotten from the electric company is they said Friday night at midnight is when we're likely to have power. So you're talking about businesses, grocery stores. I saw some street lights on, but I will say this, one of the things that's great is men in South Carolina have chainsaws, and they are taking all those trees on their own off the road. So the roads are a little bit more open. But I'll just say this. It's nothing like people in Asheville are facing. We're about 45 minutes outside of that. Just terrible, absolute tragedy in that area.
Have a lot of people come into South Carolina? Have a lot of people sort of where you're staying? Are you seeing a lot of people who've moved from the area of destruction, of the worst destruction? Have they moved into South Carolina and the sort of areas around the destruction?
I haven't seen it. And part of the reason is the roads are blocked. People can't get out.
That's
so
right.
You're talking about mountain towns. It's about 2,000 feet above sea level. Again, you don't think of a hurricane area being 4 hours from the ocean and 2,000 feet above sea level. You don't think, oh, this is hurricane country and this is where it's going to be devastating. But you're talking about windy roads up to the mountains. It's a beautiful area, tons of hiking, and all those roads are blocked. So I even have some friends in Asheville, and I got in touch with their family. And I said, if they want to stay with me, here's where I am. And they're only able to communicate with people outside. They have to go 2 miles away to even try to get some kind of cell service. And they can't get out. The roads are blocked. So I haven't seen people come down. And I think we're just going to see more and more of the devastation. I think it's really terrible that it's helicopter only in some of these areas for rescues.
We're speaking with Beverly Hallberg, who is, within proximity of where things were really bad. By the way, we have friends. John Nolte, who's one of the editors over at Breitbart, a friend of the program we've known for a long time. He's in Boone, North Carolina, and we've been trying to get him on. We can contact him and stuff, but he's like, we got other stuff going on. I can't really do any media right now because it's just so devastating when you see it. And all of the works, towns are under curfew. There's got to be such stress for people who can't reach anyone there because, it's kind of a new phenomenon if you think about it, that at any given moment you can pick up a smartphone, click a button, and do a video call with somebody. Right. And when that infrastructure goes away, suddenly you feel like, oh, my God, they must be dead.
Right. And we even had prayer requests asked for by some of my family members where their in-laws, they couldn't get in touch with them and pray for so-and-so. And part of that was there was just no communication. They couldn't get in touch with them. We found out that they're fine, but there's a lot of that going on. But we also know there are these little towns where people still don't know. And one of the things that's super scary about it, and of course there's going to be a huge loss of life. Obviously, you don't have the power, you don't have the communication, but you don't have running water. You don't have safe water. And we're now going days. And something that really surprised me was when I finally was able to get online, and that was, Saturday, so the day after, I was surprised at the lack of coverage. It was really focused on Atlanta and Tampa. And I don't necessarily blame the media a ton for that. I just don't think people knew because communication wasn't getting out of those areas.
Well, what are you hearing from people around that area, sort of that media blackout, but also what are you hearing about the response? Are people frustrated? I mean, President Biden yesterday or a couple of days ago said, no, we're done. We don't have any more resources for them. And it sounds like people aren't getting the help they need. You talk about there's no potable water, there's no communication, you can't get out of the roads. I mean, there's this testimony from a guy on Twitter. He walked 11 miles to get to his parents up one of those winding roads. What are you hearing from people? Some of those guys with the chainsaws you were talking about.
Yeah, I think people, there's a place where they're horrified, but they're also not surprised, if that makes any sense. I think there are a lot of people in rural America who have felt left behind for a long time. This is also part of Appalachia. You're in the Blue Ridge Mountains here. And I think a lot of what I've been hearing is people think it's political, that the Biden administration doesn't care about them, and they're not really that surprised. I think you had former President Trump go to Georgia, which isn't too far from here. I think that encouraged people. I think if J.D. Vance wasn't on the big TV tonight for his VP debate, I think maybe he would have stopped by. I think that would have been great. I hope he still does. But I think people are feeling very discouraged. They're like, what about us? But part of it is they haven't had access to media, so they don't know. All they know is the help isn't coming like we expected it. And here's the power of X. I really don't know if the media attention would have been there if people on X weren't actually sounding the message. So I credit the power of social media to even getting help and getting an awareness to this area.
Beverly Hallberg, thanks for joining us. We're glad you and your family are safe, and extra glad that you had some communication so we could get this firsthand report. Thank you, Beverly.
Thank you, guys.
It is 7:40.
Hey, the big vice presidential debate is tonight, which is great news for the People's Popular Front of Judea, 9 a.m. on WMAL.
Well, we have to take a moment to note the passing of an absolute sports legend and pop culture legend. Pete Rose passed away at the age of 83 yesterday. He was the all-time hits leader in Major League Baseball, sort of an iconic figure over the course of the last several decades, and sadly also his legacy is marred a bit by the fact that in 1989 he was barred from baseball because he was caught betting as a coach. And it's kind of ironic considering how sports betting is now such a part of the culture. And, you go to a Major League Baseball park now, you'll see ads for the casinos, for sports apps where you can be sitting in the stands and bet on the game.
And he was given a lifetime ban.
And I think even worse, they banned him from the Hall of Fame. Say what you will about him betting on the game, and he did break the rules, but his legacy as a player should not be tarnished. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And now, I think he will get in there, but he will not live to see it.
Absolutely. We are a reinstate Pete family.
Are you?
Family.
Oh, sure.
Yes,
of course.
Absolutely.
Your husband's from
was
Ohio.
A huge fan growing up. So.
And, by the way, the greatest nickname of any ball player, really any sport. Who wouldn't want to be called Charlie Hustle? That's a great
That's right.
Rest in peace, Pete Rose. 7:53.